Well, hey everyone, welcome once again to the Epcot Studios, as we're calling it here at Channel 7. When we posted a video last week, a lot of you pointed out, hey, it looks like you're recording this at Epcot. Well, it does, and that's why we've started to call it the Epcot Studios. When you come in, you can turn on all of the lights on an iPad, and it says Epcot Studios. Someone even commented it looks so good they didn't believe it was real. It's real. It's spectacular. This is our new studio, and this is going to be where we record a lot of Bills content, really for the next several months, especially during the off season when we're not at the facility as much as we are basically from July all the way until whenever the season ends. And something I wanted to focus on today, because I do think it's a pretty interesting debate, is what the Bills are going to do with Rasul Douglas, and also, to a lesser extent, what they're going to do with Damar Hamlin. So, for the Bills, most of their starters next year are scheduled to return, but both Rasul Douglas and Damar Hamlin are free agents, and those are two guys who started for the Bills last season. So if there are going to be changes with these starters the Bills have coming back, those are the two most likely positions where I do think we could see some changeover. Douglas, to me, is a bigger factor than Damar Hamlin, but we'll eventually get to that. Rasul Douglas is a really good player, but I think we saw Rasul Douglas's play slip a little bit in the second half of last season. They brought him here to be a ball hawk, game-changing cornerback. In his first season, he was making those plays. In his second season, he was still a good player, but he wasn't making the interceptions. What the Bills need to figure out is, are they going to give a contract extension to Christian Benford now, or will they wait another year? Christian Benford is elite. He has earned it. But if you're going to do that, you probably aren't going to pay a lot of money for the guy opposite of Christian Benford. You can make the argument both ways if that means it's more or less likely for the Bills to bring back Rasul Douglas. What I ultimately think ends up happening with him is, I was just looking on Over the Cap. It's a really good resource. Over the Cap and Spot Track are both really, really informative about what his evaluation is, what his valuation is as he becomes a free agent. And right now, it looks like it's kind of in the range of $3.5 to $5 million a year. If the Bills were able to get Rasul Douglas back on a contract for 1 or 2 years around that money, I think it would make sense to bring him back and kind of pencil him in as the starter, and then draft somebody with one of, let's say, your second-round picks to be the heir apparent, because the Bills have shown, not with Kaiir Elam, but with other corners, that they are able to develop them and really get them to reach their full potential. It would almost be the same thing they've done over the years with Dorian Williams, with Terrell Bernard, where they used third-round picks on those guys, had them sit a year, and then kind of grow into their role. They don't have a third-round pick this year. They do have 2 second-round picks. So what I think is the most likely outcome right now is that they give Douglas a short-term deal. He is very close, by the way, with Christian Benford, so this would make sense to have those two guys kind of run it back, but also use some sort of asset on drafting a young cornerback who can be your primary backup and then eventually take over when Rasul Douglas ends up leaving, or if he gets hurt, or if the play slips. The other thing, though, would be letting Rasul Douglas walk and trying to go find a player you believe is ready and more capable of kind of locking down that other side of the field from Christian Benford. There's a couple interesting names in free agency that might make more sense for the Bills. You've got guys like Charvarius Ward. You've got guys like DJ Reed, who the Bills know from the last couple of years that he was with the New York Jets. So those are some of the other free agent options. But when you look at lists that say, okay, who are the top free agent cornerbacks? Usually those two guys and then Rasul Douglas. I think they would value having the guy that they know while also still addressing the position in some way, shape, or form. It's all about the money to me. If Rasul Douglas doesn't cost you a ton of money, I think it makes sense to bring him back. But it has to be on a short-term deal. If Rasul Douglas goes and tests the market and gets a big contract from somewhere else, they probably let him walk, and then they figure out where they go from there. But I think that is the more important position that they need to address, and then you get to the safety position with Damar Hamlin. I don't really see a world where Damar Hamlin is back unless there's just not a market for him elsewhere, and he doesn't feel like he needs to be guaranteed a starting job. They just used a second-round pick on Cole Bishop. I think in their minds, they want their safeties next year to be Taylor Rapp, and they want their other safety to be Cole Bishop, who they just used a second-round pick on. Because of the injuries, because he was banged up at the start of the year, he had a really kind of slow way of getting acclimated into the Bills' defense, he got exposed when he was on the field early in the season, especially that Texans game. You think about him getting beat over the top. There were a couple plays in the Ravens game where he was taken advantage of. But that said, he did get better as the year moved on. You even think about him starting in the AFC Championship game. Not a lot of plays where I think, oh, Cole Bishop was the reason that that play happened. I think he did at least a commendable job as a rookie and will continue to get better, partially because what I said earlier, the Bills do have a knack at getting the most out of their defensive backs. That's something that this coaching staff has been able to do. So if you're going to run it back with Cole Bishop and with not run it back, if you're going to run next season with Cole Bishop and with Taylor Rapp, then I don't see how you would bring back Damar Hamlin unless he just doesn't have a market and you can bring him back on a relatively cheap deal and he can be your primary backup. But I also feel like he's probably going to have a market. He's probably going to get a chance to start somewhere. And I don't know if the Bills would be comfortable with, once again, having him and Taylor Rapp as their starting safeties. It felt like at times this year that was one of the weaker links on the Bills' defense. And we have talked about the defensive line is the biggest focus for the offseason. I totally get that. And a great defensive line helps a secondary. But I still think that is an area where the Bills need to get better. I would even be okay if they were looking to improve the Taylor Rapp job. And if Taylor Rapp once again became kind of the primary backup and they used him in different formations. I don't think that's going to happen because Taylor Rapp did really start to trend in the right direction in the second half of the year. But I do think safety is a position where the Bills need to be better. So with me, the two players, I feel like there's a good chance, I would say, that Rasul Douglas is back, not a great chance. And then with Damar Hamlin, I don't think there is a good chance that he's back. I think that he's probably played his last game in Buffalo. We shall see how it ultimately plays out. We are now getting to the point where it's not going to be as quiet anymore. The NFL Combine begins next week. My colleague Dom Tibbetts is going to Indianapolis. He's going to have coverage. We're going to hear from Brandon Beane. We'll hear from Sean McDermott. We're going to kind of get a better outlook on what the offseason is going to look like. The Combine finishes, right, in the, let's say, first couple days of March. Teams can start talking to free agents on March 10th. So we're only a few weeks away, less than a month away, from really starting to see how the Bills roster next season is going to take shape. And then all of the moves that they make in free agency or potentially with a trade will really kind of show us or give us a clearer path on how we think they approach the draft in late April. So I did want to talk about the secondary. I think it's obvious. Christian Benford, Taron Johnson, those guys are definitely back. I think there's in their starting positions. I think there's a very, very, very strong likelihood Taylor Rapp is also, once again, one of their starting safeties. My questions are really, though, about Rasul Douglas and Damar Hamlin. So just a little quick conversation on the Bills' defensive backfield. We'll talk more about some of the other positions as we get closer to the start of free agency. But once again, things are about to pick up soon. Thanks for joining us again in the Epcot studio. We'll talk to you guys soon.